Hi, my name's DeBoice, and I'm the Provincial Bark Beetle Coordinator with the Ministry of Forest Range in British Columbia. I want to talk to you today about the mountain pine beetle and its role in the forest, a bit about its life cycle and the impact it's having on British Columbia's interior pine forests. This is a common misconception, is that the mountain pine beetle is indigenous to British Columbia and to lodgepole pine forests. It's been around as long as lodgepole pine trees have, as opposed to, an invasive species being introduced from another country. It's part of our forest. Mother Nature allows pine trees to get about 110 or 120 years old, and they become susceptible to the mountain pine beetle. And the mountain pine beetle is a natural agent in the life cycle of the pine tree. This is a sample of a pitch tube, and this is the tree's natural defense to pitching the beetles out. So the young trees have enough sap that when the beetle first punctures the bark, the tree emits sap and actually traps and smothers the beetle in that globule of pitch. So if you see these pitch tubes on trees in your yard, that means there's a good chance you have beetles. If the tree was able to pitch them out, you're in good shape. If there were more beetles than the tree had pitch, that's the time to look under the bark to see if there are galleries. The pine tree is attacked by the female pine beetle. She can recognize the silhouette of a pine tree and the smell of a pine tree. She burrows through the bark, emits a pheromone, and that pheromone that she emits mixes with the mycene of the tree, that sharp, pungent smell when you're cutting your Christmas tree or you smell a sawmill. That's called mycene. And that mixes with the pheromone, attracts the male beetle. They breed under the bark. Within days, the female is laying 60 to 80 eggs, and that perpetuates the life cycle. An infested pine tree, you peel the bark back, and here's what you'll see if a beetle is successful under the bark. So this is where the female beetle has entered down in this area here, and once the breeding occurs, she starts her egg gallery going vertical up the tree, and she'll lay eggs in the egg gallery, 60 to 80 eggs on either side of the gallery. Those eggs morph in a matter of days into larvae, and the larvae start feeding in their larva stage laterally out from that vertical gallery. So these are referred to as the larval galleries, and they will continue to form those galleries, eating the cambium layer of the tree until fall, when they overwinter. And in this sample, it's an adult beetle along with a larva. So that white grub is about a third or fourth star instar larva, along with the adult beetle. So the actual size of the adult beetle, they're smaller than a grain of rice. You can see there's two adult beetles here in the gallery. The actual size of the adult beetle is somewhat smaller than a grain of rice. You can see two adult carcasses underneath the bark here. When the beetle first enters the tree, it introduces a blue fungus, or the blue stain that you hear about in our lumber. That blue fungus is actually what kills the tree, not the beetle. And it's on their hair of their legs, and it's on their mouth parts. They plant it when they get under the bark, and they farm it similar to aphids. And they eat the blue fungus as well as the cambium layer of the tree. And the fungus grows through the sapwood, chokes the life system of the tree, and between that and the damage the beetle is doing, eating the cambium layer under the bark, the tree dies. And it's dead by the next year. The needles fall off, the tree becomes a lightning rod. A lightning bolt would hit it, start a fire, a forest fire, and an entire drainage or valley would burn down. And pine is a fire successional species. Yeah, it needs heat to open the cones to regenerate the seed, and it needs the nitrogen caused by the fire from the ash to grow the new pine forest. So that's how nature replaces pine forests, and that's why if you fly over the interior of British Columbia or drive through it, you'll see very vast areas of even-aged pine, and that's from fire history of 100 years ago. So again, a very natural event. So why do we have this epidemic? Well, we've been putting forest fires out in British Columbia for about 100 years. Certainly for 80, we've been very aggressive, and British Columbia has developed into one of the top wildfire fighting experts in the world. But what we've done unknowingly over that 80 years is we've interfered with that natural cycle of fire replacing pine forests. So there is 3 times the amount of mature and overmature pine in British Columbia today than there was in 1913. So we tripled the amount of old pine in British Columbia. Then along comes climate change, and the factor that kept beetles in check years ago were cold enough temperatures in the winter to keep them at endemic levels. So now that it's warming and we've tripled the food source, those are the perfect ingredients for the perfect storm that we're seeing as an epidemic in the province of British Columbia today. So in closing, if you're in one of those areas where you still have some unaffected pine trees, especially those valuable ones in your backyard or front yard, some things to think about, some treatments that at least reduce the risk is increase your irrigation. The more water a tree has, the more sap it can produce, which is its natural resistance to the beetle. There are anti-aggregates called verbenon that you can get at your local hardware store that sends a pheromone message to the beetle that the tree is full, and it will repel the beetle. Unfortunately, it'll go to the next tree that is available, which could be your neighbor's. So if you're using verbenon, you should do it in a neighborhood plan with your neighbors or your municipality or regional district. Screening is also an option. It's a little more expensive. It's $300 to $400 a tree, and you can wrap screen around the bole of the tree. The beetle is not capable of chewing through the metal, but you can only wrap the screen until you run into the branches of the tree. And there's a chemical called 7, and certainly chemicals and pesticides are controversial. It's a personal choice, but should you choose to use them, they have been proven to be effective. A chemical called 7 that can be applied with a boom sprayer above the screen. And the reason for doing those types of things, the verbenon and the irrigation, is to try and hang on to those trees until the large populations crash around your community, and hang on to the trees until that beetle eats itself out of house and home and stops producing beetles in the forest around you, because those forests are just too large to do single treatments on.